Welcome to another episode of Production Value Matters, the Business Events Podcast. And this is our January episode of the AV Advisor. We do one of these a month where we answer questions about production, about events, and anything that you might be curious about. If you're interested in being on the episode or would like to have a question answered, you can reach out to us at Connect, that's CONNECT, at byrneproductionservices.com. Send us an email with a question, reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a DM or a voice recording, and we'll feature that recording on future episode. So again, that's connect at byrneproductionservices.com, and we'll answer your questions live on air on one of the episodes. And of course, as usual, if you're really interested in the podcast and would like to access more resources like further deep dive articles, some downloadable content, and of course, past episodes, go to productionvaluematters.com and you can subscribe there. And if you like our content, please help us promote it by either sharing it on social media or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Please give it a rating and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. All right. So for the month of January, I thought we would talk about how to set yourself up for success in 2025 for production. It's a brand new year. We've just all come back from the holidays, some nice rest and relaxation, and hopefully some great time with your friends and family to rest and recharge for 2025. So I imagine, like most people, you're probably sitting at your desk going, "Oh my God, there's so much to do," and really, that's a really great sign. The events industry and event marketing has gone through some tumultuous years, since the pandemic and the recovery. And, to this day, I still don't think anybody has really sort of felt like they got settled back into a sort of stable industry. So it's really great to be able to say that this is going to be a really busy year. There's a lot of stuff happening in events, and we'll be exploring those topics further throughout the year and certainly over the next couple of months. If you don't already listen to our monthly industry panel, that'll be coming up as well. Can't wait for that to kick off for 2025. And there's a lot happening in the industry, and which is going to make people's jobs easier in some respects, but a little bit more challenging in others. So in this episode of AV Advisor, I thought we would talk about what are the factors that we really need to pay attention to going into 2025. So I have always believed that any event is a combination of three really important factors: the right people, the right process, and the right technology. So if you get those three right, it will set you up for success. I think that there's another dimension that we'll talk about a little bit later in the episode, but that's also your budgets. There's a lot of economic factors out there right now that are affecting the world of event production, from incoming and outgoing administrations through North American governments to, the economy at large, and how that will always affect the event industry. So we want to make sure that we are keeping aware of those things, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's first talk about people. So the labor market has gone through some different changes over the last couple of years. As we all know, labor rates have gone up. We had a lot of shortage in 2023, 2024. That has, I think, settled a little bit over the last year and a half. But as we go into 2025, like focusing on people and that as that one of those key pillars to that triumvirate is going to be really important. And so I think setting up yourself for success in 2025 means development and learning. That, for most of 23, 24, with the labor shortages and the cost of labor going up, we were trying to fill holes. A lot of organizations found themselves really busy and trying to take on a lot, and found that it was really hard to find the right people and get them for decent investment and all of those kind of things. So I think in 2025, your biggest people thing is going to be development and learning. And so investing the time and energy into giving your teams, your partners, those that you mentor and are trying to train up, that development and learning investment is going to be really important. And there are great ways to do that. There are online resources. I think Julia Solaris has some training programs, or at least some thought leadership programs that allow you to give access to your teams to give them that skill set. But that also comes into things like the Event Leadership Institute, MPI, and a lot of the associations still run some really robust training and development programs. And I think 2025 is going to be the year to really help those teams grow. One of the things that we tackled on one of the panel episodes in late 2024 was the fact that I think it's 70% of the of people working in this industry have less than 5 years experience. So they're relatively new. And a lot of people were hired for some of their soft skills, like they were good people. Is that even a way of saying it? They had great people skills. They had a great understanding of projects and how to manage conflicting priorities, all of those kind of things. But there is a little bit of a knowledge gap in the industry now for things that I think people who have been in the industry a long time might take for granted as a knowledge base. And 2025 is going to be the year to be able to really invest in shortening that knowledge gap. So one of the best ways I think to do that is going to as many events as you possibly can. Not only in industry events, which I think are really important, whether that's the IMEXs of the world, the MPI Education, World Education Conference, or any of those sort of related association events and industry-centric events. I think it's really important to give your teams and the people that you really want to invest that energy in the ability to go to as many events as possible in other industries or other verticals that are close to what you're doing. And there are some marquee events right now. As I record this, a lot of the marketing and experiential world is at CES in Las Vegas, or the Consumer Electronics Show. I mean, that's a perfect place that if you can invest that time and energy and frankly money into it, then it's a great place to send your people to get them to experience the world of events from a attendee perspective. We sometimes get so focused on the job that we are doing, fulfilling the task, the scope of work, or whatever it is, that we get some blinders on. And if there's a cool event happening in town, it's worth buying a ticket for some of your team to go and experience it and learn from it and go and bring that back to you as whether you're an in-house team, a third-party agency, or an independent planner, to go in and really experience those things firsthand and to bring that knowledge back into the team so that when you're asked to have those creative and interesting ideas to move those metrics forward for your business or for the team, that you have this lived experience to be able to leverage into that conversation. Now, I mean, it's too bad the Eras tour is now over. I would say, yeah, get your team tickets to Taylor Swift. That's an expensive proposition, but there are sort of B2B events that are happening at convention centers all around you, no matter where you are, that you can leverage. You can send them to these public events and see if they can glean some kind of like, that was really interesting. You don't have to wait just for that industry event to feature it. You can go see in Canada. We have something that happens in the late summer, early fall called C2, which is very marketing and brand focused. But it's one of those destination events that I send teams to, and hopefully myself, if I have time, to go and attend, because I really want to see what's being done at that event, which isn't necessarily an industry event. It's something that we should invest some time. The other thing that I want to emphasize about setting ourselves up for success in 2025 is the concept of, and this is something I tell my teams all the time, we are a mostly remote team. We're sort of in and out of the office as required. So I give a lot of responsibility to my team to do their work and make sure that they are contributing and are accountable to what they are meant to do. And the expression I always use is don't make anybody hold your bag, which isn't to say that you shouldn't ask somebody to hold your bag if it's getting a little too heavy, or if you need that kind of assistance. But everybody's responsible for their contribution to the success of this organization. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that the commitment that we all make to each other is that we will never make anybody hold our bag. And so instilling that kind of what may have been called ownership in your teams is going to be really important for 2025. Because the reality is that, yes, there are a lot of mandates to go back to office in a lot of the sort of corporate world. And I think that that's going to grow over the next 6 to 9 months. But there are still teams that will find enormous efficiency and great ways to collaborate in a remote setting. But what's really important in that is, as I said, creating that sense of accountability to each other in the team, not just to management. And that comes from that idea of don't make anybody hold your bag. So that's where I kind of think about people for 2025. Let's talk about process. Process to me is really, really important. Not in a sense that, hey, I went step 1 to 10 and then I stopped because nothing could happen, or in getting too bogged down in those details, but understanding why a process exists and the purpose behind it, I should say, and understanding that we should never be precious about that process. Unless it is completely key to having this. So as some of you listeners may know, because I talk about it a little bit every once in a while, I have a background in working in theater and the arts. That's how I grew up, and I cut my teeth on a stage. And I used to say there's a couple of expressions that come out when you're in a theatrical career and in conservatory training, which is what I did when I was in college. I went to a theater school. And we used to say, don't reinvent the wheel in KISS, or KISS, which is keep it simple, stupid. And I used to say, look, theater has been produced in this way for 500 years. The reason that we do it that way is because it works as far as a production process goes. And so not trying to advocate that your process should be locked in stone and followed to the letter. But you should have a sense of refining it on a constant basis. If you have an SOP for your event or for your event process and how you produce events, it should be a living document. It should be somewhere, something that you are constantly refining and looking at and saying, did that work? Did it not work? And how can we improve it going forward? The second thing I'll say about that is to test and measure. So look, you get together with your teams, you say, hey, I think we should do X, Y, and Z before we execute something. It's really important to test and measure that and understand what that test will reveal. And moreover, using things like the concept of survivor bias to understand, well, what is the thing that we didn't see, right? We were so busy pushing this button. Did we forget to pull the lever? All of those kind of things. So testing and measuring is absolutely important when it comes to your process. And having that feedback from your team is invaluable. To be able to sit with a team after an event, or prior to, in the midst of, and after an event, as sort of 3 general areas that you should do that test and measure, it is vitally important to then bleed into that refine. That will set you up for success so much in 2025 by really being honest and not precious about what that process does. Is it actually building the thing that or achieving the objective that we want to achieve? And then finally, using data. Find every opportunity to quantify and contextualize that new process, that refined thing, find that data point that is a key indicator. Whether or not that is more hard analytic data. In data, you have qualitative and you have quantitative data. And quantitative data is pretty easy. It's math. 1 + 1 = 2. So, if we did one thing and then added another thing and then two things came out, good math. That's quantitative data. The other one is qualitative data. And especially in the event industry, I feel like we are very intuitively familiar with qualitative data. Qualitative data is sentiment, is net promoter scores, which again uses a little bit of math to understand a qualitative data point. But you have enormous sources of data if you play your cards right, with feedback, with commentary, with anecdotal evidence. And if you leverage that data to then test and measure your refined process, I think you're going to set yourself up for an amazing 2025. Talking about technology. So we continue to see more integration with AI, but whether or not that is AI being worked into different platforms, I think that's going to be one of the biggest technical or technology innovations over the next year. That AI is going to be further and further integrated into our day-to-day workflow. It's going to be further and further integrated into the other bits of technology, and not in a promotional way that we have seen over the last 12 months. It's not going to be, now we're an AI company kind of announcement. It's going to be quieter. It's going to be in the background. It's going to become ubiquitous. I was recently listening to a podcast through Morning Brew, which is one that I always recommend to people to listen to. No promotion deal with them, I promise. And so they're theorizing, and I agree with this, that the same way that sort of Google and search engine optimization has become so ubiquitous with everything that we do, whether or not that's through in that world of digital marketing, SEO is such a ubiquitous thing that is integrated into every strategy in every platform, whether it's social media, a website, or anything else. I think AI is going to rapidly throughout 2025 become that ubiquitous part of every platform. We've seen it in big ticket platforms like Salesforce, and Google is now integrating AI into their search engine optimization strategies. And I think that's going to hit the events industry as well, that the platforms that you use, whether it's Cvent or other registration platforms or data analytic platforms, especially in virtual webinars and hybrid events, the back end of AI being an underpinning of every single thing that you do is going to become more and more prevalent in 2025. But I always like to emphasize that AI right now is simply a tool, not a replacement. And what's the expression that keeps on going around, that you're not going to be replaced by AI, but you will be replaced by somebody who knows how to use AI. And so the reality is, no matter what, that you're going to have to understand AI and understand how ubiquitous it will become as part of your day-to-day work. So invest some time going back into that development and learning aspect with your people. This is a good time to give them that opportunity to be able to find out what they can do, play around with AI, understand how those AI tools can be used to leverage efficiency and creativity, and understand where it's going to show up in the most unexpected places. We've talked about this before, but the way that other traditional event technology like lighting, audio, and video has, the supply across North America certainly has sort of settled into a place where it's no longer as rare as it used to be. There's an enormous creative opportunity to design with existing inventories, and you can be immensely creative. A lot of the limitations that maybe 5 years ago would have been prohibitive, and the example I always use is LED tile. LED tile technology has grown exponentially and quickly over the last 5 years, but is now gotten into a place where the ability to curve LED tile, the ability to either to make custom shapes, to map content has become so readily available that it really opens the door to the ability to use those elements in really, really creative ways. And the melding of technology, like integrating lighting and video and audio into immersive experiences, has become more and more readily available as well. Whether or not that's, it's now a matter of timing and intent than it was a limitation of what the technology could do. About 5 years ago, that was a limitation that I'd really love X to do Y so that Z happens. It wasn't necessarily possible without a significant investment in time, energy, and money. Now that technology has sort of grown up, as it were, and is so readily available that it is possible to say, hey, we'd love this video to trigger a lighting effect with a sound effect. All of that can happen quite seamlessly, and those user platforms and the integration of those different technologies has come so far that it is really, really quite achievable for a realistic budget at this point. So, if I were to give any advice to help you set yourself up for success in 2025, it would be that. It would be, start thinking about melding those technologies together in a meaningful way. And then I'm going to round out the episode with talking about budgets for 2025. It's the beginning of the year. People are looking at a lot of different economic factors and probably feeling a lot of pressure from leadership, from their audiences and stakeholders on how you can leverage budget for 2025. Like, what should you budget? How much is it going to cost? Who knows? And I certainly don't have a crystal ball to tell you whether or not those economic factors that are going to come into play for certainly in the next 3 to 6 months, I don't know how those are going to play out. And anybody who tells you that they do know is frankly lying, because nobody knows. But I think we need to be aware and stay aware of what some factors that are outside of everyday control are really going to play out. Whether or not that is tariffs being applied from various players in the grander scale economy, labor shortages that may come out of global immigration policies from country to country. But we need to be aware of those. So, paying close attention to things like exchange rates and tariff rates and labor reports is going to be really important. But the big lesson is to just don't panic. We as an industry have been through a lot of economic change. But certainly throughout my career, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've seen economic crisis and pandemics and all of those kind of things. And I will say, I have immense faith in the events industry because we are such resilient people. What is the expression? We have contingency plans for contingency plans, and I think that's the mark of a true event professional, that they are the ones who know that they can get a lot done with whatever they happen to have in hand. So, certainly stay aware of those economic factors, but I would say don't panic about that. And really understanding the sort of one of two bucket budget thought process you might be in. And the first one being, we need to do the thing for this much money. Like we have a limit. This is it. We need to accomplish this goal with this money. That 90% of the time, that's going to be your budget strategy. You're handed a budget either from a client, from leadership, from a director level, whatever it might be, somebody in charge. And you're told, hey, we have to inspire our sales team. We have to get more customers. We have to get the word out on this thing or this product or this service for a set amount of money, which is, as I said, about 90% of budgets this year are going to be in that category. And from all indicators that we've seen recently, it's going to be a little bit less, or at least not a lot of uptick or change from 2024. The other one, and this accounts for about 10% projects out there, is how much will it cost to do a thing? Again, I think that's 10% of the industry. It's not the entire industry that is going to be approaching their budgets that way, but there is sort of a 10% market share that does that. And I always like to think about the art of reframing. I was recently doing some research on Steve Jobs and why he was so successful in his pitches at his conferences. And one of the things that he used to do is reframing. In the famous example of the launch of the iPod, it was like the third generation iPod. He came on stage and he reframed the product so that it made it much clearer to the audience what they were really getting for a premium price point. At the time, the iPod was priced about 10 times more expensive than its closest rival, which was, I think, the Microsoft Zune, which is aging myself. I realize that, I know the term Zune. So, but what he reframed it was everybody out there in his competition was saying things like, oh, it's got this many megs of memory. It's got this kind of chip. It's got this kind of screen. And all he really did was say, you know what? This holds more songs. I think it was like 10,000 songs. That's how he put it. And he actually reframed the cost based on CD technology that was like, you can buy a burnable CD, it holds about 100 songs, but it costs $5. So you're 50 cents per song. By the time he got to the iPod and he said, yeah, this is $349 US to purchase, but it can hold 10,000 songs. So you're essentially 3 cents per song on this. And it was a brilliant way of sort of looking at and reframing the cost of the device to the audience that was going to buy it. And I thought that was brilliant. And how I think we should approach budgets for 2025. Now, this goes beyond just a cost per attendee, but it's a reframing of and sometimes we use this when we're putting budgets together. We start to think about, hey, this element will cost you X, and so on the outside it seems like an enormous expense, but here are the reframings of the implied expenses if we don't do that, if we do it in a different way. And I will say that exercise will sometimes lead us to say, oh, no, we shouldn't use a big LED screen. We should just do map projection because it'll have less of a cost, but more of a return, whatever that might be. So use reframing when you're starting to think about your budgets of, what is this really actually like? How much does this affect bottom line dollar for the organization that this event is meant to benefit? And, I'm trying not to be facetious about this, but it's not necessarily about cost per attendee, which I think is a metric that we sometimes use in the industry a little too much. We go, oh, we're doing this gala event and it's $1,000 per attendee worth of expense. But how does that $1,000 per attendee turn into $10,000 worth of funds raised, at which point that ratio is much more acceptable. So reframing that for you and your teams as you discuss budgets is, I think, going to be vitally important. And the last thing I'm going to say about budgets is clarity. There's this story I like to tell about going to an industry event, 10 years ago. And I was in a workshop and we were talking about budgets or something like that. And the person running the workshop was trying to play to the audience of the event planners in the room and wanted to push on a pain point. And so she had mentioned like, oh, what's the question a vendor always asks you? And they all in unison went, what's your budget? And I was very surprised and taken aback because as somebody who has been admittedly in sales and business development for many years. Yeah, that's a question that I always want to know. I want to understand your budget. I want to understand, as I said a little bit earlier, we need to do a thing for this much, or we need to do a thing, how much is it going to be? I really want to sort of understand what your budget is, and I have always had difficulty trying to get that out of potential clients and partners to understand what are they really trying to spend, and what all of those things. And so I will advocate for a lot of clarity by giving that clarity to your potential partners, by giving that clarity to your teams internally or externally, is going to be vitally important for 2025. We just need to be realistic. We need to understand what the expectation is, what kind of investment we all want to make in this event, what its objectives are, and whether or not that number on a piece of paper is going to translate into a successful event. And I think that comes from clarity. I think that comes from transparency. And so for your budgets in 2025, I would say adding that level of clarity and that transparency is going to be vitally important. All right. Thank you very much for joining me on this AV Advisor episode. Again, if you're interested in being on the episode or asking a question, or if there's something that you really want to know about production for live events and how to add value to that, certainly reach out to us at connect@byrneproductionservices.com. You can ask us a question there, or send us a voice recording, or just reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, and we'll feature your question on a future episode. And of course, again, if you would like the episode on whatever platform you're listening right now, please leave a review and subscribe to help support this content going forward. And if you're interested in subscribing to our bi-weekly newsletter, where you can get access to past episodes, deep dive content, and articles, please go to productionvaluematters.com and subscribe there. Thanks, and have a great month. Production Value Matters, the Business Events Podcast, is brought to you by Byrne Production Services. To learn more about Byrne Production Services and how we can achieve your business goals with meaningful event designs and elevated production value, head over to byrneproductionservices.com. For tailored AV consulting, check out theavadvisor.com, where you can book a free 15-minute consultation. Also, be sure to search for Production Value Matters, the Business Events Podcast, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for listening.